Hey, Acceptance Squad. This is Alex from Alex's Autism Acceptance Channel. Wherever you are watching in the world, hope you're having a wonderful day. Today, I am here with my friend Kaylee Noe. Kaylee did student teaching with the same supervisor that I did. We both had some challenges with that, but we're going to explain what happened and the message of hope behind it. So thank you so much for coming on, Kaylee.
Thanks for having me.
So tell me a little bit about when you were diagnosed and when you found out you had autism.
So unfortunately, like most women, it took a long time for me to become formally diagnosed. I, as a child, always exhibited the signs. Growing up, I was born in the 90s. So during the time, autism wasn't really a part of the conversation, especially for girls. As a baby, I didn't like to be held. I didn't like to spend time around people or noises. And while that should have been a warning sign for my parents, the doctor said, "Oh, that's fine. It's just who she is as a girl." And as I kept progressing in age, more of these signs and symptoms were very, very prominent. But once again, it was just written off as, oh, she's just a girl. She's emotional. She can't handle things like other people. And so it got written off. By the time that I was in college, I started to seek help for anxiety. I started taking medication and I realized that this medication was not helping me at all. So I asked doctors if it would be okay to get off the medicine. And as good care professionals, they said that before I got off the medication that I needed to do just like a psychiatric check just to make sure that it was a wise decision.
Sure.
And after I took the evaluation, they said, "Has anybody ever told you you have autism before?" And as an educator, I was like, wow, no one's told me that, but it makes a lot of sense. So I was in my early 20s when I found out.
Okay, fantastic. All right. Did you have any problems with our university's leadership before your student teaching supervisor?
Before my student teaching supervisor, no, not really. I don't think that I had any specific problems. There was one class, which is ironic. Oh, sorry. It's ironic that the class was about disability and inclusion, because I mentioned having a disability, and often the teacher would ask me to comment on things or would say things like, "Well, you can't answer this question because of your perspective." And every single time I went to that class, I just kept thinking, how is she going to call me out today in a way that's going to make me feel really uncomfortable?
Yeah.
Really, like I am not a normal human being, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So just to clarify, it was sort of like it wasn't planned or anything. Like she would just like call on you
Yeah.
to say
Yeah, not
that's
planned. It wasn't like she'd ever said, "Oh, Kaylee, today that we're going to talk about sensory overload. Would you mind sharing some of your perspective on that?" It was just always like right in the moment, let's call her out and see what I don't know. It's fine to be able to offer my perspective. It's fine for me to be able to talk about these things. But what's not fine is when it's just expected that I'm going to do those things, or even just to talk about these things around other people without my permission. Like I said, I feel comfortable doing it, but I just think it's not fair to assume that everybody's going to feel comfortable talking about these things, because everybody feels the same way that I do about it.
Definitely. And like without permission too, and especially like I know with a lot of cases, like you need to have like a warning in advance in order to have like a really good response for in a lot of cases. So I definitely think that's messed up. Did your supervisor treat you differently after you disclosed your diagnosis?
Yes, she did treat me differently, unfortunately. I was maybe a month or so in when I think the first evaluation came.
Mm-hmm.
was making comments towards the way that I was acting emotionally towards the children, the lack of affection that I was showing them. It's important to know that I was in kindergarten, in a kindergarten classroom. So hugging children is not something that is uncommon, but she suggested that I should show more affection by touching the children more, hugging them more, maybe smiling in their direction. And whereas I was showing them affection in my own way, I felt like I needed to stand up for myself. So I told her that as someone with autism, I don't really show my love, care, and attention by touch, just because I don't really like touch. And from that moment on, every single time she came for an observation, she was very quick to point out my flaws because of things that might be related to who I am as a person who has autism. And it didn't really seem very fair to me because they weren't things that affected my teaching. They were just more things that defined my character. And because it didn't matter what she thought was a good educator or a friendly educator, it was wrong in her eyes.
Yeah, that's the thing. That's one of the things that I did dislike about the supervisor. She sort of made it like, hey, there's just this one formula to be a good teacher. And if you don't follow that one formula in every aspect, then you're not good. That's basically what I got from that. So
yeah, I feel that that's really unfortunate because most people who are struggling with some sort of disability that can't be seen always face to face or eye to eye, they're automatically written off as different. And I think, unfortunately, even in the education system, that's something that we as educators are still very bad at. And we need to.
Yeah. Absolutely. So you sort of answered this a little bit, but if you could expand a little more, if you want to, what did your supervisor say that made you think that they had a problem with people with autism?
I don't think that she ever outright said anything to me that made me feel that she was against people with autism or that she didn't believe that people who have autism could be educators. But the things that she asked me to do made me feel like she didn't value my needs, my cares, and the things that allowed me to thrive. So for example, I served as a kindergarten teacher for the past 3 years. And I think that the way that I loved my students, it came through in the sense that I saw smiles on their faces. I received verbal affirmation from them that they felt loved and safe in my classroom. And even, at the end of the year, saying things that kindergarten was a great experience, that they loved it so much, they're going to miss it, they don't want to go to first grade. And those are signs to me that I'm doing something well enough that children feel that they're welcome, that they are cared for. And I did all of those things without having to affirm them with hugs or have to have really loud, stimulating things in the classroom, like fun music playing all the time, or blaring lights that were just very distracting, or even, not that I'm saying that I didn't smile, but that my lack of facial expressions, it didn't cause them to feel like they were unloved or unwelcomed in my classroom, because it was quite the opposite. So I never got that feeling from her that she was against people with autism, but I did always feel that I was never doing enough and I would never be enough to be in a classroom in a place where children could thrive, succeed, and feel like they belonged and wanted to come back.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that goes back to the general attitude with her about teaching by the textbook and all that, and just pretending that everyone is the same and all that. I get exactly what you mean about the lack of facial expressions. But this is my 4th year as a camp counselor, and a lot of the kids I've seen for the past 4 years, and I barely show any expression. My voice tends to be very monotone, but they still like get super excited when I come in. They're like, Mr. Alex. So it's like I clearly bring something to the table, and facial expressions are not a requirement for that.
No, they're definitely not. Really, I feel the way that people feel loved is by the way that you treat them,
Yeah.
the way you interact with them, quality time. It's so much more than that. But I do feel it's not just a problem specifically with this supervisor, but more so just with older educators in general. And not to say that younger educators don't have this problem, but older educators especially are very, I don't want to say that they're uneducated in what it's like to work with people with autism or even ADHD, but back then, these were not diagnoses that were being talked about or things that were being treated in the classroom, but more so seen as a nuisance and something that could be trained out of a person.
Yeah, or treated or solved. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you believe your supervisor's bias was conscious or unconscious? And either way, please explain why.
I think it was unconscious, probably due to the environment that she was brought up in, the training that she received as an educator, and probably lack of training that she's receiving now as a supervisor. I think that, and maybe I mentioned this earlier, but we as educators are not doing good enough when it comes to staying relevant with things as new research or data is coming out.
Yes. Yeah.
Very often we get stuck in our ways, stuck in our mindset because something worked a long time ago, but it doesn't mean that it's going to work now. And I think that that's kind of the mindset that she was stuck in, that as an educator, she was very successful in talking to her students this way, who may have had autism or ADHD, and they grew up to have really great, successful lives or whatever. And that's great. But now thinking about the trauma that maybe they are having now, that they don't realize is trauma because of the way that they were treated, or feeling like they can't fully express them, having to mask because of all of these microaggressions, I guess is a good way to say it, that were put against them that they didn't realize were microaggressions. And I think something that could be so beneficial is to continue educating our educators, no matter whether they're in the classroom or not. But if they're interacting and they're teaching and they're trying to, like provide a better future for those coming up, they need more help. And she definitely would be one of those people who would have benefited from reading some recent surveys or looking at recent data and seeing how she could have been more effective as an educator.
Yeah, absolutely. And in her defense, that is barely talked about. And you really just can't find any information online about that, about autistic interns, if you will. And yeah, I totally agree about like her sticking with the old studies. Like every time I did an evaluation, she was like, think about what Vygotsky said, think about what Piaget said. That was 80 years ago, right? That was literally 3.5 generations ago. Like autism wasn't even a thing when those papers were wrote. So definitely like encouraging them to have the updated information. I think that's absolutely valid. Yeah. I imagine you were pretty shaken up by their attitude about it while it was going on. How long did it take you to recover from that? Because I gotta say, like, I got terminated 4 months ago now, and I still I just got done feeling awful about it. So how long did that take you?
Well, to be honest, right after the first time she had mentioned my lack of expression or physical touch with the children, I brought it up to my supervising teacher, and I asked her if this was something that I really needed to improve upon, because my teacher, she was also not a very touchy-feely woman. She was very black and white. And from what I saw of her, she was doing a great job engaging with her students and making them feel loved. So I was very, very thankful to have had her as a supervising teacher, because she really made me feel assured in what I was doing. So it didn't really stick with me very long, in the sense that every time she said one of those things, I really kind of checked myself with a truth. that I was equipped, I was knowledgeable, and I was doing the best that I knew that I could do for these kids. And that's really what kind of kept me going, because often people are going to tell you so many things, especially in the education field, whether it be parents, it be coworkers, or it be administrators, that you're just not doing good enough. And here are 27 ways that you could be doing better. And if you took all of those to heart, wow, teaching would be actually the worst experience for you, because you would never be good enough. You would
Yeah.
never kids, you would never be following the curriculum the right way, or even all of the rules and expectations. So it was a good thing that I had the educator that I did, because she really put me in that mindset early, which I think really helped me with the rest of my career. Because the unfortunate thing is that I will always have autism, and I will always be this way. So there are going to be other educators and administrators who have problems with this, but I need to remind myself too that I am uniquely and wonderfully made. Although my God didn't intend for me to be someone who had autism, this is what ended up happening to me. And now how can I serve these people that God has put in front of me in a way that still honors them and gives them exactly what they deserve?
Amen. That's a fantastic attitude about that. I do wish I put that into practice. I fully believe it, but I have trouble putting that into practice, especially when I go through all those things. But it's definitely a learning process.
It's absolutely hard, and it's not something that happens overnight, for sure. So
Yeah.
the time that you took to grieve and to be upset about this, it's valid, because the other thing is that God,
Yeah.
we get upset, or when people hurt us, it hurts him too. And he doesn't want us to just roll it off our backs and say, that's fine, moving on. He expects us to grieve. And in that grieving process, he meets us and he gives us these truths, to be able to move on from these hurts, but also to be able to grow in a deeper relationships with him, in the sense that, like, it doesn't matter what other people have to say about you or the negative things that they think about you, because what really matters in the end is what our Creator thinks of us, and exactly why he put us in this position. Because it's no mistake that you're an educator. It's no mistake that I'm an educator. We have these gifts. We've been called to serve these kids. So everything that we have is given to us for a purpose, and it's going to be used to our benefit, to be able to love those kids and be able to glorify God in the end. So however long it took, it doesn't matter.
1000%. People watching, you can leave an amen in the comments if you got this far. So, fantastic point. Yeah. If you have any idea, why do you think that the university is allowing bias supervisors to keep working?
I don't think that it's that they're allowing this to happen, like knowingly saying, oh, well, we've had these things come up, and well, we don't really appreciate the work that they're doing, but let's keep them on anyways. I think it's just a lack of awareness. And once again, it's a lack of education. I think that if people are coming out with good reviews and nobody's complaining, I think that it's just a blind thought that there isn't a problem. Because I know that I'm not one to complain. And I think that a lot of people are one to just say, well, that was a really crappy experience, and just walk away, not really thinking about how that they can make the system better. So I'd like to believe the best in my university, that they really truly care about their students. But I just think that maybe more people need to step up and make the problem known, so that they can do their part on educating their instructors and preparing them for the next generations of people who are going to be experiencing different things, and making sure they're staying relevant with all these things that they're experiencing. Because the truth of the matter is that every single generation that comes up, there's some new thing that we've never experienced before. So for example, in our generation, and maybe just like a little bit older, the idea of people with autism and with ADHD, it's something that's very, very new. Because just like you said, years ago, it was something that was seen as more of a behavior, something that can be trained out. But now I think that is who you are. Whereas like now the next generation's coming up, it's going to be a lot of gender and sexuality. How is that going to play into the classroom? How is that going to play into identities? And once again, if we're not training ourselves to be able to treat people with love, respect, and kindness, then we're not going to be doing any of these generations justice in giving them the serve, and also giving them the platform too.
Yeah, I mean, I think you said it perfectly. It's like just sort of going through the motions, and it's not doing anyone any good. I think you said that perfectly. Yeah. What is the message of hope in all this?
I think the message of hope in all this is knowing that people are always going to make mistakes, for one, that no one is ever going to be perfect. And that's encouraging because that allows us the grace to be able to make mistakes and to do better. So for example, learning from these experiences where we've been hurt is another way that we can treat our students with love and respect.
Yes. It's sort of like a cycle.
Yeah, to stop the cycle, something that I was always very quick to tell my students, and granted, as kindergartners, being diagnosed with autism or ADHD is not something that happens that early. But I am always very quick to let them know that there's something different about me, but that different is okay. You just have to be who you are. And it's something that is so sweet to be able to see young children take into account. It's the first lesson that I teach actually when kindergarten starts. For the first week, we focus on the things that make us different, the things that make us who we are, whether they're things that you can see or not see, and we celebrate each other's differences. And it's amazing to me because you think that it's just like a way to like get to know each other, but this idea, it follows us throughout the year. All the time I'll hear say something like, oh my gosh, I can't believe he's eating that. And then someone will say, it's okay, just be who you are. If you like it, you should eat it. And it's so great knowing that because of these experiences that I've had, I can start to change the mindset of these students who are going to be the next generation changers and with them.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's absolutely wonderful. Like that much representation that early on. I mean, that stuff becomes ingrained in that, and with that wonderful positive message that you have, man, your kids are going to grow up to be amazing people.
I appreciate that.
Oh, I'm sorry, I missed one question, but second to final question. Do you think you would have a different attitude about what has happened if you were not a Christian? Because I know I would.
That's a really, really hard question because so much of what I believe is grace and forgiveness.
Mm-hmm.
So really thinking back to how I felt, I like have to put myself back in that position.
Sure.
I had a really wonderful supervising teacher who would have encouraged me. I think that forgiveness for my supervisor and just the way that I was treated, it also came very quickly to me. Just because I felt that I was already so affirmed by my teacher. So honestly, I'm really not sure, but I do know that without just the forgiveness that I've been given so freely, it's probably very probable that I would have been a jerk about the whole thing. I would have not been forgiving, and I probably would have moved on with a lot of resentment. Just in my heart and as a person, like, would I have said anything to her? No, probably not. And I still probably wouldn't have said anything to the university, which is also a big problem. But I just think that it would just be something that I would carry and I would speak very negatively about rather than having the view that I have now.
Totally. Probably
the only difference that I feel that I would have is just carry it with me longer and would have a different viewpoint.
Yeah, because I mean, at the end of the day, it's discrimination, and no matter what, that hurts. And whether you have forgiveness or not, like there's going to be some pain there. And so I think it would definitely be justified to have a negative attitude, especially if it weren't for your beliefs. So yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
Final question. How can autistic individuals during their internships look out for supervisors that may have bias?
Well, I think it is important to know that you do not have to disclaim anything about yourself that you don't want to. Just these are things that define you. It doesn't mean that other people have to define you this way. But I always think that, especially in the education field, it is good to be honest, only because we as educators should know how to be able to differentiate instruction to be able to meet the needs of our students. So it really is up to you if you want to say something or if you don't want to say something, but it could be more beneficial if you want to have the instruction meet you where you're at. But if you are experiencing any sort of bias or microaggressions, I think it's important that you speak up about it, and make it known why it is that you are doing something a certain way, but also not to feel bad about it, just to kind of be proud of who you are. And hopefully in that proudness and even in that confidence that you're exuding, whoever is training you will also start to feel that as well. As we mentioned earlier, teachers look so different. There is no one right way to be a teacher. And I think that this is a great way to start letting people know that just because I'm someone with autism and I use a very monotone voice, it doesn't mean that I love you or my students any less. It doesn't mean that I'm excited about what we're doing. It's just how I speak. And hopefully that starts to change their minds. But if it doesn't, try and be an advocate for yourself. Tell your supervising teacher, tell your university. Obviously, this is not something that I did, unfortunately, but the more that we make it known, the more that people can do something to help us change the system and make it a better experience to prepare educators for what the real field is going to look like.
Absolutely. Couldn't
But
agree more.
I do, this is important to be said that even if you say something and even if you advocate for yourself, that does not always mean that change is going to happen. And especially when you are in the actual education system, it just because you make this thing known about yourself the way you are, that does not mean that you're going to be accepted. And I think that that's a harsh reality that we need to be prepared for, and what you do with that information, because also how you react is just as important as how you act in the present. And if we want to change things, we have to make sure that we are going to be people who are pushing for a positive change, advocating a positive change, rather than being part of the problem, not educating people, being closed off, or just being downright rude. Sorry, how was it?
No, yeah, absolutely. We definitely have to go about this in the right attitude and show everyone that we're in it for the right reasons and we're here to help everyone, not just ourselves. And the way we do that is by being kind, being respectful, being appropriate, being professional. That is how change is made. So,
because I have had people within the buildings that I work in, when I disclose these things about myself, they look at me and they're like, so do this thing. And so you're not always going to be greeted with, thank you so much for letting me know about this. Yes, I'll absolutely do this thing. Or, oh, thank you for telling me this is just the way you are. Like, I feel so much better now. No, it's not going to happen that way. And we just have to be prepared for that.
Sure. And yeah, I think you said that perfectly.
Thank you.
All right. Well, Kaylee, Noe, thanks so much for coming on. For those who stayed till the end, let me know what you thought about this entire interview and how it helped you, because I am so happy when even one person explains that they got helped by this. So thank you, Kaylee.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
All right. Have a good day. Cool. All right.